The town of Ravenwood was drenched in the spirit of Halloween. Kids ran from door to door collecting candy, their laughter echoing through the streets. The crisp autumn air smelled of pumpkin spice and burning wood. Porch lights flickered, illuminating carved jack-o'-lanterns grinning wickedly in the dark. But at the end of Oak Street, there stood a house that shouldn't exist. A rotting, towering Victorian structure with twisted, blackened wood that seemed to breathe. The windows were not windows at all, but empty voids, gaping like hungry mouths. The entire house shuddered as if alive, the walls pulsing faintly like diseased flesh. No one in town remembered this house ever being built, yet every Halloween it was there. And every Halloween, someone disappeared. Daniel, Jessica, Ryan, and Emily stood at the rusted gate, staring at the impossible house. "This wasn't here last year," Jessica whispered, her voice uneasy. Ryan, trying to play it cool, scoffed. "It's just an abandoned house. Someone probably set it up for Halloween." Daniel grinned, always the reckless one. Only one way to find out. He pushed open the gate. It groaned. A deep, unnatural sound, like something waking up. The porch was lined with rotting pumpkins, their faces distorted, as if they had been melted into twisted expressions of agony. The wooden floorboards felt soft, almost like flesh, squishing slightly under their weight. Ryan hesitated. "Maybe we shouldn't." But Daniel knocked. 3 slow, booming thuds. The door creaked open on its own. Inside there was only darkness, and the stench. Something rotting, something sweet, something wrong. Then, from deep inside the house, a voice whispered, "Trick or treat." The door slammed shut behind them. The hallway was too long, longer than the house should have allowed. The walls breathed a sickly, wet sound pulsed through the air like something massive shifting inside the walls. The wooden beams bulged and contracted like lungs inhaling. Then, footsteps, slow, dragging. Something was coming. Ryan aimed his flashlight down the hall. A little girl stood at the end. Her back was turned, her dress was soaked. Her hair hung in long, wet strands dripping onto the floor. The air grew thick and humid, like standing in a room full of rotting fruit. Then, she moved. Not turned. Snapped. Her head twisted all the way around, a wet crack splitting the silence. Her face was missing. Her mouth was too wide, stretching beyond human limits, her teeth black and broken. Her empty eye sockets oozed something thick and dark. "Trick or treat," she whispered. Ryan gasped. Then, her jaw unhinged and split apart, opening all the way to her collarbones. From her throat, a mass of writhing, blackened tongues spilled onto the floor, each covered in tiny, gnashing teeth. The walls split open, revealing hundreds of faces, mouths stitched shut, eyes moving wildly. Their lips trembled as if they were screaming, but only a horrible, wet gurgle filled the air. Daniel turned, but the floor was no longer wood. It was meat. Veins pulsed beneath their feet. And then, the floor opened. Emily was yanked down. Pale, skeletal hands burst from the ground, dragging her into the living flesh. Her body folded unnaturally, bones snapping as she was swallowed whole. Her face remained, staring up from inside the floor, eyes wide, mouth moving in silent terror. Then she was gone. Daniel, Jessica, and Ryan ran. They burst into a nursery. The cribs were rotting. Inside each one something moved. Soft, wet, cooing sounds filled the air. Then one of the cribs fell over. Something spilled onto the floor. A bundle of hands, each finger twitched and clawed at the air. Then the door opened. A woman stepped inside, but she was too tall. Her limbs were stretched unnaturally long, her fingers dragging on the floor. Her face wasn't a face. It was a mask of stitched-together mouths, all whispering at once. In her hand she held 3 dolls. Each one looked exactly like them. She held up Ryan's doll and twisted its head backward. Ryan collapsed instantly. His head snapped, his mouth stretching open, laughter pouring out, dozens of voices at once. "You knocked." Daniel and Jessica fled to the front door. It was open. They could see the street outside. They burst through, gasping, stumbling onto the pavement. They made it. They were free. Daniel turned back. The house was still there, and standing in the doorway was Jessica. Another Jessica, smiling. Her eyes were black voids, her teeth too long, too sharp. The real Jessica froze. The other Jessica tilted her head. "Why are you out here?" she asked, voice dripping with mock confusion. "You belong inside." Daniel grabbed Jessica's hand. "Run!" But it was too late. The house was already gone. The street was empty. Behind them, the Halloween festivities continued, as if nothing had ever happened. as if they had never existed, because the house had taken them, and now it was waiting for the next knock.